Hi, AJ Hartley here, novelist, Shakespeare professor, fan of other forms of art. And I wanted to talk about something today which just came to my attention a little while ago. It's a really interesting story. So a few years ago, I published a novel called Cold Bath Street, which is a ghost story set in my hometown in Lancashire, in northern England, in a place called Preston. And it's a story of a boy who's like 15. He's coming home from Scouts. He gets attacked by a ghost of some sort in the first chapter. And it basically reaches into his chest, closes its hand around his heart, and he dies in the first chapter. And the story then is about him trying to make sense of his version of death, because he's sort of trapped in this moment. It's always 9:22 in the evening of a September cold, dreary day in Preston, and nothing around him changes. There are no people. The town is the way it was as he remembered it, but he's sort of stuck there except for other ghosts. And the story is about him trying to figure out how and why he died, trying to figure out what happens next and to see what alternatives there might be, and also trying to stay one step ahead of some of the ghosts who, it turns out, are dangerous even if you're already dead. And it's a very personal story because I had been writing a lot of things that were not about me. And this was the first time I'd written something that grew very directly out of my own experience as an adolescent in 1978 in Lancashire. And that's where the story is grounded. And it's about feeling like a ghost, feeling like you're trapped in this particular moment and watching the world as you know it go on without you, as the people who knew you move on with their lives. So it's a scary story. It's, I guess, a kind of suspenseful, horror-ish kind of novel, but it's also quite tender and thoughtful and reflective about loss and absence and those kind of things. It was the first book that I published with UCLan in the UK, but it never came out in the US. We're trying to sort of resolve that, hopefully next year. Anyway, this is a long preamble to something that happened recently that I found out about. So an old school friend of mine called Phil Ainsworth, who we were at the school that is in the story, right? The book is very deliberate in trying to anchor everything in my own real experience. And part of that experience is the fact that this kid, whose name is Preston Oldcorn, goes to St. John Southworth School in Preston, which is where I went and where Phil Ainsworth went. And we were in the same year. And, obviously that was 40 years ago. Our lives have gone in very different directions. He still lives in the UK, in the Preston area. I obviously don't. And for a long time, we sort of lost touch. We weren't in connection. And then somehow I can't remember how we reconnected, through the internet, through Facebook or something. Got together with some old school friends, and I see him periodically when I go back to the UK. So Phil, it turns out, is a devotee of a British I'm trying to think of a good way of putting it. He's an artist, but his special focus is making artwork for existing books. His name is James Voce, V-O-C-E. Does these illustrations of existing books in which he creates a piece of art out of the book itself by cutting away text to reveal an underlying image, right, which he builds up with color and shape. And the pages then are sort of overlaid and cut away on top of it. And a lot of the stuff is really, really cool. And he's done some really striking, interesting pieces for lots of books that you would be familiar with. And you can look at his website. I'll include it in the description. And you can check out his stuff. A lot of it is great. And so Phil had liked some of this guy's stuff and entered a competition where you could win a commission for a book of your choosing. And amazingly, Phil won and he chose Cold Bath Street. So James Voce then built this really, really cool illustration. Now, as I said, when I was talking about the book, Preston is killed at the beginning by a spirit creature that he identifies as the Bannister Doll. The Bannister Doll is a ghost story that many people in Preston will be familiar with, that we grew up with. There were various versions of the story, and most of them show up in the novel. But initially, at least, Preston is convinced that he has encountered this ghost that he's particularly scared of. He's always hearing this story, as I did. And he's terrified of this ghost of this girl. And he sees this figure, she comes towards him, and she kills him. And as I say, he's then frozen in this moment, 9/22. And so what the artist has done is created an image of the Bannister Doll. And that moment I said that she reaches into his chest and he feels the sort of cold grasp of her hand around his heart, and his heart stops. And this takes place at the moment between as 9:21 turns into 9:22. And so that's what we have here. And I just wanted to show you this because I think it's really cool. Part of what I really like about this is that Cold Bath Street was originally quite heavily illustrated as a book. The first version has all that beautiful cover art. And then, and it was illustrated throughout, and there's some really cool images. This is the first time we see the ghost. This is the hardcover edition that came out after the original paperback. But what I like about this new illustration is the way that it captures a number of interesting things about the book. I love the emphasis on the heart because, as I said, this is a book with a lot of tenderness in it. So the heart is not merely the way that he dies at the beginning. It's also about who he is and what his journey is really about. But we see that the heart here is sort of laid out in terms of we get that sort of circulatory system, and it's very angular. It looks like energy, like bolts of lightning, but also like the branches of trees. So I think it fits the setting really well. We also see that sort of the emptiness of the eyes of the ghost. There's a line in the book at the beginning that says that when he looks into her eyes are more like mouths, and he feels like he's being pulled in somehow. And of course, in the course of the story, this idea of what the ghost is and what the ghost represents gets complicated as we learn more about her backstory and such. So there's a poignancy to it as well. So I really like the way that this image has captured a lot of those different elements in it. So that's all I wanted to say. I just think it's a really cool thing. And I love the idea that a work of art, I'm talking about the book itself, can generate new forms of art, in the same way that it might turn into a TV show or a movie or something, or a comic book. I like the idea that these things have become a work of visual art, but a work of visual art that stays absolutely literally rooted in the text by growing out of the very pages of the thing in that sort of collage effect. So we get a visual image that grows out of the words of the story, which I think is really cool. So yeah, check out his work. And thanks to Phil for getting this on his radar. And that's it. If there is a US edition of Cold Bath Street coming, I will keep you informed, let you know. Because it's not super easy to get hold of in this country. And I'd like to see an edition come out in the next year or so. There's a sequel to Cold Bath Street also called Rittenstone Lane. All right, that's it. As ever, please like, comment, subscribe, check out my Patreon page. My patrons who contribute a little every month, and it helps to keep this channel going. And I really appreciate all their their help. I'll include the link to the Patreon page in the description for this video in case you want to chip in. Check out my books, including, of course, Cold Bath Street. Check out my merchandise. I have a little merch site for t-shirts and things. And that's it. I will see you soon. Thanks. Bye.